that in mind, we have our next guest joining us on the phone, which is Jay Gonzalez, who is the only declared candidate, I believe, for governor right now. And so I do appreciate him once again joining us here in the greater New Bedford area. Good morning, Jay. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Chris, and good morning to all your listeners.
Thanks. All right, so we have this. Well, first of all, let me say congratulations, because in my experience in politics, when you can get your opponent, the incumbent, to respond to your criticisms, then you pop the champagne cork, you're making a difference. And that is what has happened. You have an article in the Globe that the Republican Party is criticizing you for criticizing the governor. Talk to us.
Well, this wasn't about trying to elicit a response. This was more to point out to people that we've got a real problem. The governor is failing to manage the budget. And this was his whole case for being governor, was that he was going to be a good manager.
True.
But once again, he is scrambling at the end of the state's fiscal year to close a big budget gap. And he's been scrambling throughout his administration to put Band-Aids on holes in the budget. And it's not because of outside factors that are outside of our control. It's because he has mismanaged this budget. He's doing things that are irresponsible. He's not following policies that we put in place when I was responsible for the budget during much harder times under Governor Patrick. And there are going to be real impacts to people. There have been. The mayor is right to be concerned about possible impacts to the city of New Bedford. And lots of people who depend on the budget for programs and services that the state provides. Look, we're not even doing what we should be doing to adequately address a lot of the big issues we have. Appropriate funding for school districts across this state, our transportation system, child care and early education. We're not even close to doing what we should be. And because of the governor's mismanagement, all of these things are at greater risk. And it's not okay. And he needs to be held accountable.
Jay, you, of course, served as budget director, I believe, was Secretary of Admin and Finance?
Yes.
Under Governor Deval Patrick. And as you point out, well, when we had Mayor Mitchell in here, he mentioned the economy is in pretty good shape right now. And his concern is that what are revenues going to look like when there's a downturn, and there inevitably will be?
Well, it's a really good point by the mayor. So when I was there, it was the Great Recession. We successfully managed the budget. We had to make a lot of tough decisions, but we continued to maintain important investments like in public education and record investments in infrastructure, and we achieved the highest bond ratings in state history when I was there. And when I left at the end of the recession, we had a higher rainy day fund balance than we do today under Governor Baker, even though we've been in this period of economic growth. And what's going to happen, as the mayor's suggesting, is when this economy turns, and we just had our first quarter of an economic contraction. We didn't grow this last quarter. And that may not be a trend, but there's going to come a point, there always is, where the economy starts to turn. And when that happens, because he has positioned us so poorly and irresponsibly, because he has not been following the policies we put in place when we were there, a lot of these services and programs that people depend on are going to be at risk of being severely cut. And it's a disservice to the people of this state.
We're speaking with Jay Gonzalez, who's running for the governor of Massachusetts. He's running for the Democratic nominee, running to become the Democrat nominee for the party here. Jay, what's your website if people are interested?
Thanks for asking. It is www.jayforma.com, and it's JAY4MA.
All right, so you are a former healthcare executive. You ran Celtic Care, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yep, Celtic Care Health in Massachusetts and New Hampshire Healthy Families in New Hampshire.
What, as we look at, of course, we're in the embryonic stages here of the new Trump administration's healthcare bill. It just passed the House. We know that's going to take all kinds of different changes and shapes, and if it ever even gets passed. But what are your comments, criticisms, concerns about what's going on the federal level for healthcare and how it will impact Massachusetts?
It'll have a huge impact on Massachusetts. This is extremely concerning. The biggest problem for us is, and we were the first in the nation to provide near universal health insurance coverage to our people in this state. That is at risk because of President Trump and because of this Republican Congress. There are hundreds of thousands of people in Massachusetts who are likely to lose coverage if this bill gets passed and signed by the president. because we depend on a lot of federal funding. And even before Obamacare, when we did our own health care reform in Massachusetts, the federal government paid half that cost. They are threatening to pull back on a lot of federal money that we depend on to provide coverage, particularly to lower-income people in this state. It is a huge problem. And we've got a governor right now who is making half-hearted statements saying he's disappointed, but not doing anything to actually fight to try to preserve this coverage and this funding that we depend on. Now, the governor of Massachusetts alone is not going to be able to dictate everything that happens in Washington, D.C.
Right.
I get that. But people here should expect that their governor is going to do everything he possibly can. Work with other governors to put some pressure and lobby Congress and the president. You know, he developed a relationship with Ivanka Trump. Go talk to her. Go meet with people in the United States Senate who are now considering this bill, and educate them about the real risks and concerns and additional costs that are going to come if people lose health insurance coverage. This is a huge concern, and our governor is not doing nearly enough to stand up to Donald Trump and the Republican Congress.
Let's put you into the future, and we recognize we don't know what the bill is going to look like, but let's assume that Massachusetts loses a big chunk of their funding. Are you committed to helping to keep people on these healthcare programs and doing something from backing it up with state revenues? Is there something that you'd commit to?
Well, if I were governor, I would be doing everything I can to fight this from happening at all. If it did happen, it's going to be a huge problem for us, and I would commit to do everything I possibly can to preserve coverage for everybody. It's going to be a big problem, though. It is potentially billions of dollars. As you said, we don't know what the final bill is going to look like, but it's potentially billions of dollars. One thing that is true, we got to fight hard to hold the line in Washington and keep from moving backwards, which is the direction the president is trying to take us. But even the healthcare system we have today is not what it should be. It is broken. This issue at the federal level could make things worse. But one of the big reasons I'm running for governor is we aren't doing enough to try to move forward and make progress in areas where we need to make progress. And the healthcare system is a great example where it's way too complicated for people to navigate. It's way too expensive. You know, one of the governor's problems in mismanaging the budget is he's having a terrible time controlling healthcare costs. He's not been successful at that, and it's too expensive for families and businesses. So I think we need to take a big step back with our healthcare system overall. We need to put everything on the table for consideration, including single payer. There are lots of inefficiencies in the system that we could root out and simplify the system and make it cheaper and easier for people to navigate. And I think that should be our goal. We need to be aiming higher than we are. Of course, we got to defend what we have with the federal government, but we need to move forward. That's what we've always been about, and that's the type of leadership I want to bring to the governor's office. We're
speaking with Jay Gonzalez, who's running as a Democrat to be the governor of Massachusetts. And one issue that's going on here, what's going on across the state, is this legalization of marijuana. There's currently a moratorium. Local communities are putting a moratorium on it in my opinion, to see what the state's going to do. What's your opinion on this legalization of marijuana? How would you handle it should you sit in the governor's office?
Well, the voters approved this law, so I think we've got to respect the will of the voters. That would be my overriding principle. I do think, though, there's a role for the legislature and the governor to play in making sure this law, as passed by the voters, gets implemented as smoothly and effectively as possible. Public safety should be a key consideration. And so to the extent the legislature needs to tweak the law, one example, I know they postponed the implementation of it to make sure there was enough time for a smooth implementation. I think that's legitimate. And if there are other tweaks they need to make to ensure it is implemented effectively, that's fair game. But the overriding principle should be the voters approve this, and we need to implement it.
Now, you joined us, I guess it was a couple of months ago now that you joined us here on the program. And again, I appreciate that you making the time for us here in the greater New Bedford area. Tell us how your campaign's been going. I see you've picked up some endorsements. Tell us how that's going.
Yeah, the campaign's been going great. It's been 3 months now since we launched. I've been all over the state, including in New Bedford. I was on the Cape all day yesterday, meeting with folks, and we're getting a really positive response. I started early because I wanted to have lots of time to get out and meet people, share a different vision for leadership and what we should expect from our governor and our government in terms of trying to move us forward and help take on the big challenges people are facing, and also to listen to people and hear what their concerns are and what they're looking for from government. And we're building a real grassroots campaign, getting lots of people volunteering and wanting to help. We got the endorsement, as you referenced, from Senator Barbara L'Italian, who represents Lawrence and some of the surrounding communities. We were very excited to get her endorsement and expect more to come in the coming weeks.
That's good stuff. There are other people who are looking at running in this race. We don't need to name them at this point, but my one concern for your candidacy is whether or not you'll get a fair shake at the convention. We have seen in the case of Liz Warren, her opponent wasn't given a fair shake to run at the convention. They blocked her from getting the delegates. I think DeFranco, I think her name was. Any concerns there about being blocked out by insiders?
No, not at all. I
Okay.
mean, we are not the establishment candidate, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been out talking with lots of delegates all over the state. I went to a lot of the caucuses around the state where they elected the delegates and had an opportunity to speak, and we're getting a lot of support from them. We're also in close touch with the Democratic Party leadership, and I have no concerns about not being treated fairly. In fact, I'm optimistic we're going to get a very good reception.
Well, that's great stuff, because for people who don't realize it, oftentimes this stuff that goes on, we see it on the national level, we see it on the local level, where candidates don't get a shot because of the insider game that's played by delegates. It's fair, it's legitimate, but it's sometimes kind of rough. So I'm glad that you said that. Jay, I will give you a lot of credit here for being the most honest guy around right now running anyway, because you've been very honest about the fact that you want to freeze the state income tax at the current rate of 5.1%. Talk a little bit about that, why you think it's necessary.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I forgot to mention that when you asked me about the governor's mismanagement of the budget before, but one of the things we got to be honest about is we cannot afford another tax cut right now. We've gone through a series of tax cuts in the income tax rate. It used to be 5.85% many years ago, and it's all the way down now to 5.1%, and it could go down further to 5.05 next year and to 5 the following year. And the governor is planning on that in his budget for next year, and that is real money. And we just can't afford it right now, as evidenced by the governor's scrambling to balance the budget at the end of the year. And so I've called for freezing that tax rate at 5.1%. We got to be honest about the fact that we can't afford another tax cut. And the other thing I'm supporting, because I believe we need additional revenue to invest in some of the areas where we need to take on big challenges people are facing, is I'm supporting this fair share tax amendment, which will be on the ballot in 2018 to impose an additional tax on people who make over $1 million a year, which will help fund programs that support everybody else who haven't seen the benefits of the economic recovery.
Jay, on this what's being called the millionaire's tax, are you concerned about capital flight, that people with that kind of money will leave the state, will go to New Hampshire, go to other states? Any concerns?
No, not at all. There have been a lot of analyses in other states where this has happened that have shown that millionaires didn't leave the state. And the truth is, despite the old label of Taxachusetts, we are not Taxachusetts. We're in the middle of the pack in terms of our taxes, and the fact is that wealthier people in Massachusetts pay a lower share of their income in taxes than lower income people do, and it's not right. This would make our system more progressive. It would ask those who are doing great to pay a little bit more so that we can help provide child care to people who can't afford it right now, or invest more in our schools, or affordable higher education, a transportation system people can depend on to get to work. These are things people should expect from their government, and we're not delivering on them right now. Asking those who are doing better to pay a little bit more is fair, and there's no evidence to suggest they'll leave the state.
Jay, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your opinion on use the term you want, undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, use whatever term you prefer. I think they're interchangeable at this point. What are your thoughts and opinions on that and how you'd handle it as a governor?
Well, I think what President Trump is doing generally is really concerning. I think it's inconsistent with our values in this country. I'm glad our Attorney General has filed lawsuits to fight his executive orders on the Muslim ban and keeping refugees from coming here. And this is an issue where Governor Baker and I disagree. He opposed Syrian refugees coming to Massachusetts. I think that's wrong. I'm supporting the Safe Communities Act. It's legislation pending in the state legislature right now, which would basically ensure that our state and local law enforcement officials are focused on enforcing state and local laws, not doing the work of Donald Trump's immigration agency to enforce federal immigration laws. And that's what I support, and I think that's the right approach.
Well, folks, we can disagree with him, but he's honest, and I do appreciate that about Jay Gonzalez. Jay, talk about one or two of your other priorities here in the few minutes that we have left with you.
Well, one of my biggest priorities is early education and child care. I referenced it a little bit, but this is an issue where we are doing virtually nothing, and that could be game-changing for kids in our state, particularly lower-income kids. If they get access to good quality child care and preschool, there's lots of evidence that shows it's game-changing for them. They're much more likely to be successful in school and in higher graduation rates and higher incomes and better in life. And it's game-changing for their parents because it enables their parents to be able to go to work and support the family. And that's in everybody's interest. So this is something we're doing virtually nothing on. I put out a policy proposal that where I've committed by the end of my first term, every single child in this state would have access to affordable, quality child care and preschool by the end of my first term. And I think it is so important and such a big opportunity for us that we can't afford not to do it.
And what about what's your commitment? You've told us here before, but the train link from New Bedford into Boston, what's your commitment on that?
We got to do it. South Coast Rail has been talked about for decades.
Right.
It's something the Patrick administration supported and I personally worked on when I was there. I'm concerned about the Baker administration's new approach. It's something I'm wanting to look at further and get a little smarter about, but I'm concerned that he's going to be pursuing an approach that results in a much longer commute that might end up making the train not really deliver on its promise for people on the South Coast, and so that's something I'm looking at. I think if we're going to do it, we need to do it right and need to do it in a way that's going to be really beneficial, have a great economic impact for New Bedford and the surrounding communities, and make it easy for people to get to the greater Boston area.
I want to thank you, Jay Gonzalez, for joining us here this morning on WBSM for Sunday Brunch. Jay, before you go, if someone's a Democrat or an independent, maybe even a Republican who's not happy with Charlie Baker, what's your website again? How do they reach you?
Website is jay4ma.com, JAY4ma.com, where you can learn lots about me and our campaign and what we're about and how we're wanting us to aim higher and try to make real progress that's going to make a difference in people's lives. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on Sunday. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. And if you would like to get more videos like this, please hit the subscribe button below on the WBSM channel. Subscribe to WBSM, and that way you'll always get the latest videos here from Sunday Brunch and the other wonderful programs on WBSM.